and Jotaro are cringing their skin off and they have no idea why. This week, we opened at the Nogomi residence, where we learned about some of their eating habits. Well, these food bills don't look too bad, These are just for their snacks today. Yeah, that looks about right. And speaking of crunchy numbers, they would have to do a lot of that because one or more of our heroines had forgotten to do their summer homework. Lady, have you not familiarized yourself with some of the most overused tropes in this franchise? Yeah, right off the bat, it was easy to tell that this was going to be an episode where they were going to spin their wheels, which they have done a lot this season so far, but this one was particularly egregious. Granted, this scene did have some WTF moments like the faces on our main heroines here. Yeah, y'all better get that checked out. Last I heard, catching the space bunny flu is kind of fatal. And then when they tried to visualize themselves into the word problems and kept on rewriting the scenarios. Sure, this joke did run a little long and broke a few too many fourth walls, but... Okay, Yandere makes this joke work. However, we unfortunately never reached those comedic heights again, and instead we shifted focus onto the titular fairy mascots, who were going to play outside because their partners needed to concentrate. Thus, they played one of the most memed kid games of recent years. I always like it when they give me options to choose from. But yeah, this would end up being the cause of the main conflict of this episode, with Pom Pom and Komi Komi arguing because the latter was outright cheating and in general not playing nice. Honestly, cutting over to the villains was far more stimulating, as while they didn't do their usual comedy routine, this was still just as good, if not better in some ways. Secretary tried to egg her cohort into being serious, which, okay, that's actually kind of hilarious coming from her, but whatever. It did seem to work with Narcissus, with him even doing a bit of a villainous variant of Simone's speech. But yeah, this was meant to get him to go all out, as apparently there was a lot more to him that Secretary was aware of. Interesting developments overall, though also a little concerning, but more on that later. Anyway, back with our protagonist, we got the predictable falling out between the fairies because again, Komi Komi was being a bit of a brat. And look, I'm not saying kids don't act like this, and if they want to teach them to play nice, then that's fine, but I'm just saying it's not a particularly engaging story here, especially when these characters haven't really been developed enough that I feel like we should be invested in their little plight. Hell, if anything, why doesn't this more involve the titular food of the episode? Pizza is barely used here other than as the obvious victim of the week, so why not at least have them argue over what sort of pie they want, like pepperoni or Hawaiian something? By the way, we don't take any credit for the creation of that thing. Supposedly, it was made in 1962 by some restaurant in Ontario, Canada. Still, and kind of obvious question for this video, but what's your preferred pizza topping? Feel free to leave your comments below, and we can at least feature it more than this episode, as of course, Narcissus just sucked up a pizza fairy, and we didn't even really get to see how it affected anyone, because again, spinning those wheels. No, and he also captured Pom Pom, and while I should automatically hate any animal abuser... Okay, I know he raised his death flags in this episode, but can we please try to keep this guy around and not have him be replaced with either Lazy Secretary or that tin can from the episode preview? Anyway, Amane and Rosemary came in to save the day because, yeah, I guess this is also supposed to be an Amane episode. I mean, she does give one rousing speech to Komi Komi, telling her to go save her friend, and no, I'm really not simplifying things that much. The Fox Fairy cries for all of a few seconds, Amane tells her to shape up, and she's already up a few seconds later, because there's really not much that can be done with these characters, I guess. You know, other than use them as projectiles.
Pikachu, use headbutt!
Granted, it worked, and it was clever to take advantage of the sudden mass shift from her transformation, but yeah, overall, this whole big climax to the main conflict of this episode just felt like nothing really. As for the actual monster fight, it was disjointed. I mean, obviously, the frivolous fairy partner plot was distracting, but it was also happening at the same time of a much more interesting three-way dance between Amane, Takumi, and Narcissus. And yeah, normally simultaneous fights like this would be exciting, but it was obvious that one was getting way more attention than the other. Deservedly so, mind you, because Narcissus has been the best part of this episode. Darn it, we already did the JoJo reference. They also tried to play up Takumi's abilities, even though we've already established he has Mario's counter cape. Well, anyway, the villain was defeated by a point-blank attack from Amane, even though he should have been able to easily counter her after she did a full-on monologue about hating him, but whatever, the episode's almost over. Bruh, you really shouldn't have a mullet in this day and age. Hold on, I just got my hair cut, so let me just go get the business card from my barber. Later, the fairy partners apologized to each other, even though again, I'd argue Komi was mostly at fault here, and they had the titular pizza party. No, and Komi evolved again because I guess her friendship meter filled up, I don't know. Thankfully though, we at least ended on a decent note with some more build up to what's likely going to be Narcissus' tragic last stand, as he was even given what I'm going to assume is a one-winged angel pill. Hey, so as I was editing this, I realized this thing kind of looks like a corrupted delicious stone. So that, combined with this dude's mullet, makes me wonder if he was the guy Rosemary mistook as Takumi's father, and maybe he even framed him for a crime he didn't commit. Just wanted to say this so that I can at least add some further evidence to why Narcissus is the only really good thing in this episode. This was just another episode, nothing really to talk about other than some of the developments for one of the villains of the show. I mean, I guess you could say Komi evolving again was also a development, but when they didn't make a big deal of her last evolution, it's hard to get invested in such an obvious little toy gimmick. Not helped by the fact that the main conflict of this episode was over a non-death game version of Red Light, Green Light, which, you know, if you're not even going to do that much, then why bother? I think the biggest problem I've had with this season so far has been a severe imbalance of characterization, which this episode really ended up highlighting. And sure, while there's more prominent examples, I personally find it more disappointing that they've done so little with the fairy partners of the season, especially when one of the major gimmicks has been that one of them has been evolving over the course of the season. Something like that should be used to signify character development, and yet it's been handled so haphazardly. Like, do you even remember that the Fox Fairy's last evolution was just 2 episodes ago and not even really triggered by anything? Look, I'm not saying that these critters should be as fleshed out as, say, the healing animals, but at the very least, they should have the bare minimum, especially if they're going to get their own episode like this, and a whole movie apparently. Otherwise, we don't even really know whether this sort of argument is in or out of character for them. Also, figures that poor Memdragon would mostly just stand on the sidelines the whole time. He's gotten the absolute least amount of attention of this whole cast. Thus, and kind of sadly, this whole episode was being held up by a villain of all characters. I mean, at least Narcissus does have some established character traits, and they were effectively developing him here. Sure, it's kind of obvious setup for what's likely going to be his eventual downfall, but at least they're progressing a plot line rather than repeating previous ones, and at least he's clearly having fun throughout. Thus, overall, this was a very skippable episode, in spite of technically having developments, but really, with how little focus Komi's evolution has been getting, you really wouldn't be missing out on much, you know, other than this bad boy just being delightful. Work on the second part of the 6 Ranger video is going about as well as it can, I think. It's just been kind of a busy week for me. For one thing, I really needed a haircut, as well as had to celebrate my niece's birthday. Still do look forward to it. Until then, though, farewell for now, my friends, and if you'll excuse me, I'm going to order myself some dinner. Say, who actually wants some Hawaiian pizza? Really? Really?